Mother to Baby Otis Legacy Q&A session with Stephen H. Lamm, MD. How many years have you been involved with the organization of Teratology Information Specialists, known as OTIS?
I started in the early years, in the beginning of the 90s, so that would make me probably a 30-year member.
How did you come to get involved with OTIS?
First of all, I trained as a pediatrician. I then went into epidemiology. My goal was to train myself to become a consultant in international child health. So I was with CDC for 2 years in the Epidemic Intelligence Service. I was in NIH for 2 years at the Child Health Institute as their senior epidemiologist. All that was in the beginning of the 70s. So at that point, I was busy doing studies that looked at outcomes in children from exposures to the mothers or other exposures. I became known for my work on turtles and salmonella. I did work on, was there an association between the location of leukemia cases in Connecticut with respect to the nuclear power plant. I did lead and infant formula and set that up to be reduced. So this is sort of the background that I came into. Then I came into the Teratology Society, and through that found out about OTIS, and then showed up. And I found there that they were very enthusiastic about having me, welcomed me, and made me feel a part of it. So like the man who came to supper, I stayed for 30 years.
What motivated you to get into the field of teratology?
One, you have to recognize that I did not get into only the field of teratology. My field was epidemiology and child health. So I think in 75 or such, I made my first presentation having to do with congenital malformations and whether they were genetic or environmental, etiology. So that became a common tenor in the work that I was doing. I think I came into my own in teratology with respect to the issues of Bendectin. I had been hired by the court to be a consultant for the plaintiffs, for the children and their parents, and to use epidemiology to determine how large the class of people would be who had birth defects as a consequence, or most likely as a consequence of their exposure to Bendectin in the first trimester. And fundamentally, I ended up with a report that said to the judge, that depends upon what your criteria are for an association sufficient that makes them a member of this class. But anyhow, that work ended up being quite some import. I was pleased to see how I was able to bring some semblance of order into an area where there was great conflict. And it worked in my hands. I stayed with it. I enjoyed the people who were there. I enjoyed the questions being asked.
Looking back at your career, what are you most proud of?
In teratology, I would say, number one, the number of trainees that I have influenced over the years and watching them move on to excellence in teratology. I came in a very nice time. When I came in, most of the people are a highly influential group in the teratology community were the physicians. There were, I'm not going to say there were no trained epidemiologists. There was a number, but I found here was a place where my skills as such were welcome, and I was able to be a teacher of that. So what I look upon watching the development of OTIS and the people of OTIS, where the intellectual skills that I brought in 30 years ago have been so well incorporated into their thinking and their training that you don't need an outside epidemiologist. Those skills are diffusely throughout the organization. I would say that's one thing I'm proud of. The second thing I'm proud of is I'd like to be able to say the number of children whose birth defects I cause to be prevented, and families. But I think the thing that I'm quite pleased with, because I was early at the time that epidemiology was being recognized as a field and its contribution, a number of the issues I got involved in ended up going into the legal system, generally as class cases. And the reasoning that I brought into the case was then recognized by the judges as having importance to the court, and that helped set the standards for the acceptance by the judge of what type of science would be accepted. That was finally in something called the Daubert decision, which went up to the Supreme Court. But an earlier issue I was involved in had to do with Agent Orange, is that I was able to lay the groundwork where the courts then accepted that the meaning of the legal term means more likely than not, means an odds ratio or a relative risk greater than 1, whose lower confidence limit is greater than 1. And so I think those two things are major contributions that I've made, and I'm proud of that.
What has been your favorite thing about being a part of OTIS?
My favorite part of being a part of OTIS is being a part of OTIS, both nationally and in the international research arena. Being able to work with experts in fields that I'm aware of but don't really have competence in, and then working as a team and ending up getting the studies done, pulling the data together, reaching conclusions that then have utility to the international community, and at the same time training so many different people in the teratology community in part of OTIS, and watching the growth of the field.
If you could provide one piece of advice to someone looking to get involved with the work OTIS does, what would it be?
Number one, get involved. Join a committee, review papers, write. That I would say that two of the greatest contributions that OTIS makes are worldwide are their publications and their fact sheets, plus the individual treatments that individual services that they provide to individuals. But I would say get involved in the science, get involved in developing communication, get involved in the structure so that you can move up in the organization. There's plenty of room here, plenty of space, and everybody is welcome.
What's next for you at this stage of your career and life?
Well, I nominally retired last year when I turned 80, and I said to the organizations I'm in, I'm an old man now. I will get off of your committee, make space for the next generations to come and have these places. I'm always available to you, but let me make space for the people who have new contributions to make and whose careers can be developed. For myself, I've sort of withdrawn from the scientific communities or scientific activities that I have been in, other than being peer reviewer or such. And I put my concentration into learning those things that some of those things that I always wished I had known, but never, quote, found the time for. Well, now I do. And so my major area happens to be in studying history. I'm Jewish, and I'm involved with a number of groups at the temple, which work on learning the biblical history, the pre-biblical, archaeological, linguistic, the history and how it relates to the rest of the communities. And I find I just keep growing and growing there, and it's a delight. Plus, I have much more time I can spend with Joanne. I remember when we were either courting or just married, and she says, I've married you for better or worse, but not for lunch.